Hello one and all, and happy Saturday to you. We've actually had a really beautiful sunshine filled day here in the UK today, which after a week of enough rain to fill several swimming pools, it's actually really very welcome. I hope you're having a beautiful day today, no matter what it is you've been up to. It's my pleasure to be here for Jessie James Beads today. We're currently hosting on Facebook, should be uploaded later to YouTube and to the blog. My name is Jem. I'm from England, in case you hadn't checked out the accent and worked that out. If we haven't met before, I design jewellery and teach jewellery making, primarily in wire, gemstones and beautiful Jessie James beads. Today we're looking at Golem beads. If you haven't met them before, I'm going to show you some of the strands that we currently have available for you on the Jessie James Beads website, which is jessiejamesbeads.com. So if you'd like to pop down to the board, we'll take a sneaky peek at today's project whilst we're waiting for everybody to come in and join us. I know that you've got busy days and things, and it's absolutely a pleasure to be here with you, albeit briefly. It's my pleasure to be with you. I hope that you have a lovely time too. Let's head down to the board and have a look at what we've got brewing today. This is the piece that we're going to make with the absolutely gorgeous Purple Poppy Strand. If we haven't met before, my favourite colours are purple and black. Followed swiftly by my favourite wire colour, which is copper, not least because it shows up really well on the camera. This is the other half of the Golem Strand in Purple Poppy, and after I'd created this design I realised I'd set the poppy upside down. And you know what? I didn't give one hoot. It's got quite an Art Deco feel to it, upside down anyway. I really love these artisan crafted beads. Let's just have a quick look on the Book of Face to see if the video is streaming properly. You never can tell. This is what we're going to learn together to work today. So it's a jointed piece of jewellery. It's a pendant. You could make that just a little bit smaller if you wanted to with one of the smaller Golem beads or one of the little ceramic ones and downsize it into a jointed charm. You could make it as wall art, but I love this as a pendant because when you have physical movement in jewellery, it's really eye-catching. I absolutely adore these beads. This is the strand called Purple Poppy, and you get 2 of these. Really gorgeous, strangely enough, purple and poppy infused beads. They're gorgeous. You also get some other beads on the strand as well. These ones remind me of iced cakes. Maybe it's because I'm diabetic and I shouldn't be thinking about iced cakes, but that's what they look like to me. You also get the most incredibly cool cylinder beads. Really beautiful angular design on those, and because this is Jessie James Beads, you also get bead caps, spacers and lovely little crystals as well. We've got some rondelles in a couple of sizes there, but this is what we're going to recreate in a little while. I'm going to bring you back up to my silly face for a hot second. Hello, this is me, I'm Jem. I'm coming to you from Oxfordshire. It's right in the middle of England, pretty much, and where I am, I'm halfway between Shakespeare, Stratford-upon-Avon, and the University City of Oxford. If you want to find me on a map, about halfway between those two. I want to show you some of these beautiful Golem strands. Now, I've got the list open so I can give you the proper names for each of them. So this first one is Water Lily. I'm going to show you up here because I want to be next to them. Water Lily is really beautiful. Very aquatic in tones, but the detail on these is gorgeous. I've always had a bit of a thing for water lilies. Padparaja is a variation of sapphire. It's delicately pink and orange hued. It's got absolutely nothing to do with Golem beads, but it's my favourite sapphire. This next strand, let me just check the name, is Sage of Wisdom, which I happen to think is a beautiful name to go with a really beautiful strand. Look at these babies, they are gorgeous. Such a huge amount of artisanal detail goes into these. Let's have a look at the next one. Mint Paisley, what a cool name for a very cool strand. Different on either side. I'm not going to spend forever on these, but if you haven't seen them, I want to give you a quick rundown so that you can get the same joy as we're getting. What comes after Mint Paisley is Barcelona Sunset or Barcelona Sunset. Spanish is not a language that I speak, unfortunately, so let's have a look at this one. Hola, ¿cómo estás? About as close as I get. Really, really pretty, and you can see where the inspiration for the name has come from. Really, really gorgeous colours on that one. Now I cut the next one on my list, which is Blooming Hearts. I'm just going to grab a couple of those to show you. I think that's upside down. It doesn't really matter. Gorgeous. A huge oval and a couple of the flatter disc beads as well. That one is Blooming Hearts. And the last one I'm going to show you very, very quickly is Dandelion Wishes. So beautiful. Monochromatic with these gorgeous semi-matte, semi-buff and semi-high polish zoned beads. They're very, very cool. I love these little spaces. When you have incredible, what we call rock star beads, finding ancillary beads to go with them that are equally as cool is a challenge, and I love each and every one of them. Let's have a look at today's project again. So this is what we're going to learn to make together. I am just going to check in on Facebook and see if the feed is going out safely. It surely looks like it, but it's not going to let me see it, which is fairly par for the course with the Book of Face. So hopefully I'll be able to catch up with your comments in a little while. You never know. It's not giving me the go ahead for now, so never mind. All I can do is say, hello, you beautiful people. I hope that you're doing all right. I'll catch up on your comments as and when I possibly can. So I also wanted to give you a very quick sneaky peek of this little treasure. If there is a link for your Purple Poppy and for the other Golem bead strands in the listing for this video, there's also a sneaky peek on this one as well. It's a limited kit. Class will be taking place on the 2nd of April. If you fancy that, have a quick look at the kit listing. It's lovely. So the wire that I am going to use today is round raw copper. Now round raw copper works beautifully purely because it shows up extra well on the camera against my background. So I've got 3 wire gauges that I'm going to work with today. My heaviest wire is 16 gauge, which is equivalent to 1.25 millimeters in the UK. If you don't have access to the heavier gauge, the 16 gauge wire, don't worry, just use the 18 gauge. It doesn't really make any odds to the design. It's just a nice way to introduce you to a slightly different way of creating a bail. Sometimes you want the bail to be fancy, sometimes you just want to make a little wrapped loop like this and hang it from a chain. But today I thought we'd have a look at a slightly fancier bail and a slightly fancier weave. If you don't have 16 gauge, don't worry, just use 18 gauge for that core wire, it's not a massive problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these loose beads out of the way for now. This is what we're going to make, so I'll leave this on screen in the corner. I'll probably knock it over anyway. I'm sure if Rosanna is in, she will agree with me. These are the beads that I had left from the strand, and we're going to be using some of those to create the second part to this, or the second version of it. My first section of wire is the heaviest gauge. As I said, if you don't have access to the heaviest, don't even worry about it. It's not super important, it's just a nice to have. I have around about 12 inches. I'm just going to take this other section of wire out of the way for a second because it is indeed getting on my nerves. So as ever, if you've never worked with wire to make jewellery, the most important thing you can do, other than keep trying, is give it a warm. If you warm that wire through, and all I'm doing is running thumb and forefinger across the top and bottom of that wire, just to get that smooth and warm, what we're achieving is more fluidity in the wire when we want it to create bends. We're also adding an element of smoothness to the wire, especially when you're working with a solid metal like raw copper is solid copper, funnily enough. Sterling silver is 92.5% silver alloyed with, quite often, copper. to make it a little bit stronger. But working with solid metal, if you are new to wire, it's cool because if you accidentally dink the wire with your pliers, the colour doesn't change, whereas coated copper, you just need to proceed ever so slightly more cautiously. It's not a problem at all. Once you've played with wire once or twice, you've got the hang of it anyway. So the first thing that we're going to do, contrary to how I normally build jewellery, is work on a woven section up at the top. Now it's quite a repetitive weave, so I may not go for the same length as I have here. This is around about an inch of weaving, and then it's connected onto itself. Now you don't really need to see me do the same weave several thousand times to create that. It's not several thousand times, it's barely 9 times. I'm just being dramatic for the sake of it. So what we're going to do is demonstrate the weave, and what I would say with a weave where you're not sure how much metal you're going to use, work from the reel. So the finer gauge wire I'm working with today is 24 gauge, and as I say, I'm working with that directly from the reel, so I don't have to cut a length and then find this not quite enough. So I'm just going to tame the end of that wire by putting my pliers on it, and it span away anyway, because why wouldn't it? The next piece of wire that we're going to work with is 18 inches of your 18 gauge. It's nice and simple, 18 inches of 18 gauge, which we're immediately going to cut in half. So there we go. To create the weave up at the top of our design, we're going to use the finer wire to draw together all 3 pieces of the other wires. So what we need to do is to keep the heaviest gauge, if you're using it, in the centre, and the 2 lighter gauges on the outside. If you use all the same gauge, if this is all going to be 18 gauge, then don't worry about it. As long as they don't cross over, it really doesn't matter. I'm just going to spin this around because I'm right dominant. It's easier for me to show you in this direction. So I'm just going to separate those out for a second so I don't boink them all onto the floor. I mean, there is still time. The day is young. I might still do that anyway. I have some comments. Gem without drama, it's not as fun as gem with drama? Yeah, that might be true. Margaret is there. Sandy is there. Rosanna is in, and she is agreeing. That's literally all the comments I can see. Super duper. To everyone I've missed, I will catch up with you later, my darlings, and I will try to respond to any questions that you do have. So I'm going to bring my gauge, 24 gauge wire. There's a little bit of a kink on the end, and because I'm going to be working with my fingertips primarily to get this nice and smooth, I'm actually just going to cut that away and pop it in the scrap bin. I'm going to move those 2 side wires out of the way for a hot second, and I'm going to wrap 3 times around just our core wire. I'm going to take maybe 4 inches of that lighter 24 gauge wire just over the top of that central core wire, and I'm going to wrap 3 times. Now they're a bit messy, these wraps, at the moment, but I'm not really going to worry about it because I'm just going to scooch them up until they're less messy. And what I want to do is take the tail of the wire over so that it's up at the top for a moment, and what I'm going to do is draw the cut end of the wire, come back towards me away from all of those wires together. What I want to do is to have the 2 finer wires either side, and we're maybe 1, 2, 3 or so inches in from the end. I've wrapped 3 times around my central or my core wire. What I want to do now is wrap 3 times around everything. Now, the reason we start by wrapping in the middle is because it gives us a chance to see that we need space. See, where we've taken this 24 gauge, that's set the distance between those wires. If you wrap around the 3 wires first, it's nigh on impossible to get the tip of that wire through. So we're going to wrap 3 times around all 3 wires, and we're going to try and treat this like a band. We're going to try and make it as neat as possible. So that's 1 and 2. Draw the wire back underneath. Let me just bring it up to you slightly closer. It will go slightly blurry. And then the 3rd pass over the top. So we've got 3 around the middle wire. We're working with the cut end at the moment, and 3 around all 3. As we bring the cut tail of the wire back underneath, what I want to do is very gently, ever so slightly, splay out the 2 side wires. What we're going to do then is take the cut tail of the wire and bring it up between the lower side wire and that central wire. And I want to get that as tight as possible against that little band or belt of 3 that we've just made. And then I'm going to wrap again 3 times around that central core wire. Now coming back to get that central banding nice and tight, you might want to use a pair of pliers just to push those coils that you're creating now against that central band. So that's 2 wraps around just the central wire. Again, each time I'm doing a wrap, I'm going to give that a bit of a squish. Bring that tail up between the lower and the core wire. So you can see it's just coming up here. Nice and tightly into position, bring the tail down and then back towards me. It's underneath everything else. And I'm just going to tighten up those 3 coils really neatly. So we've got 3 around the centre, 3 around everything, 3 around the centre. So I'm going to do that 1 more time. I might do it 2 more times, it depends on your boredom threshold. What we're looking to do is to create 3 passes of wire around all 3 of those. You've got a central core wire and 2 side wires. So we're banding everything together. Again, you can very, very gently open out those 2 side wires if you need to. We're going to finish off with a rotation of 3 around that central core wire. So when your tail gets shorter, let me just move that up to the top for a second because I will whack it onto the floor in a moment. You may need to use your pliers to help you. So as long as you're gentle, that's 1 rotation around just the core wire. And then I'm going to find a way to get the tip up through between the lower and the core wire again. Pop that tail down, so we're rotating just around the core wire, that's 1 and 2. Scooch those wires up. And then obviously this is much easier when you don't have a camera a couple of inches above that wire. So let me just take that last rotation around the core and bring that back down and underneath. Now when you're weaving with a finer wire, such as 24, 26 or beyond, there are a couple of ways that you can end the attachment of the wire to your core. One of the ways that you can do this is you can simply waggle the wire until it snaps. Now, I am not a proponent of this technique. I much prefer to get as close as I can with my flush cutters and trim away that excess, making sure that it goes in the scrap pot. And then just push the very end of that wire so it's super neat and give it a squeeze. If we flip that back over to the surface, you can see that we've got a couple of really quite neat bands. Now what you would need to then do is carry this on for about 1 inch to 1.25 inches before you rotate that around a round form to create your fancy bail. What I'm going to do is show you how to flip the design over. So it's easier to start the weave with a shorter end of wire. Again, I'm just going to very, very gently smooth those outer side wires so that they sit slightly more open. You can see that we've got 2 visible wraps around that core wire. So I'm going to go for a 3rd visible wrap around that core. Make that nice and neat and tidy, and I'll do 3 more wraps around everything. Now because I've got a lot of wire at this end, one of the ways that you can cheat is to go back to the shorter end to do your wrap of 3. So I'm taking the tail around, which is attached to the reel, and what I'm trying not to do is to cross these wires over. They must be moving in the same direction all the time, so that we get that nice neat band of 3. And then again what we can do is just smooth and warm, open up those side wires. You can push that band of 3 so it sits nice and neat and tidy. And then we're going to wrap 3 times around that core wire until you have that, let's go with 1.5 inches of weaving, which is plenty to make a really lovely bail. So I'm going to cut the wire off at the end of this 3rd wrap. But what you will need to do is imagine that we have filled a little bit more along so that you can get a really lovely bail that's visible front and back with that weaving. Please excuse the state of my fingernails today. I've been hanging out with a friend who restores guitars. So I've been helping him to restore some guitars, and it's dirty work. So again, trimming away at the very, very end of that finer gauge wire, 24 gauge in this instance, before we make sure that that very cut end is trimmed neatly, pushed against everything. Now when you've got your 1.5 inches of weaving, what we're going to do is very gently compress those bands. So all I'm doing is opening and closing the flat surfaces of my pliers on the banded segments, setting a really nice shape in that woven wire. So if you don't have bail makers, it's not a problem. You can use a round form to create your bail. I'm going to grab a pen to demonstrate that for you today. However, these little babies do absolutely get my endorsement. I use them all the time because you've got 6 variations of size in one. I also use my 2 size. It's a 4mm and a 6mm set of pliers, which are used for bail making. They're really handy too. If you don't have any to hand, we're going to go to the end of our weaving section that's closest to that very, very long tail, and we're going to put a right angle bend, well, slightly less than a right angle bend perhaps. We're going to put a forwards bend with the neatest side up before rotating the woven section all the way around. So for the time being, we've got a nice loop shape. It's about the size of a very tidgy finger, but it's perfect for most chains. So I'm going to show you what that looks like on the back. Now, some people will find it a little bit alarming that we've got so many wires. Please don't fret, because it's all going to sort itself out in just a second. So the side wires on the back now, what I'm going to do is take the leftmost one and put a right angle left bend. That makes sense to you. It's a 90-degree bend on the left-hand side where your loop comes back to meet itself. Over here on the right-hand side, very gently opening that up, around about the same position. I'm just opening the angle out to the side, and then you've got a central wire down here at the bottom. This is the heavier gauge wire. Well, what I'm going to do with the heavier gauge wire is truncate that, and this is on the back of the design. On the front of the design, let me take that out of shot to turn it, because otherwise I will hit the camera. You've still got all this lovely long wire, so if you're cutting, it needs to be cutting at the back. So I'm going to trim that to around about 1 inch, or just less than 1 inch perhaps. That went very, very far, that tail of wire. And in a minute, I'm going to turn that into a coil to sit on the back of the design, just to hide things and keep it super neat. What we're going to do is take one of these wires and wrap it around the core, and then we're going to take the second wire and wrap it over the top. So if I just flip that over again out of shot so that I don't hit the camera, you can slightly raise that heavier core section that we truncated a moment ago, so it's out of the way. And what we're looking to do is just to tie your bail safely. Now remember, your bail will have full weaving on it because you will have time to do that. I don't want to sit and do the same thing over and over again. If the wires in your bail start moving around, you can simply put your round form back in whilst you're undertaking this part of the tutorial. So I'm going to flip the design back over to show you what we're looking at. And I'm going to take the first one of those side wires and very simply wrap it around. So that's coming down towards the long end. And what I think I might do is just lift that central wire out of the way a little bit more, bring that tail around and just wrap it one time. Give that a bit of a squash so that that's neat and tidy. And then we're going to take the wire that's on the opposite side and do the exact same thing. So it's rotating around the bundle of wires, and just find a home for it to sit into. It could go underneath, it could go over the top, doesn't really matter. We're just trying to tie everything together. So again, flipping that over to the front, and what we're going to do is draw one of those across. We're going to turn that into a coil in a minute, the other one in the opposite direction, and then we're just going to trim one of those away. Now please do look twice to make sure that you're trimming only one of those side wires away, and you're not accidentally trimming the whole thing. So if we flip to the back, you've got your heavier gauge wire, or just the central wire if you didn't use the heavier gauge. And I'm going to rotate this up and around into a coil shape, So using round nose pliers now to just rotate, rotate, rotate until you get a little coil going, and that's going to sit on the back of the design to hide the mechanics of that bail. Now this is a basic bail design using a slightly different weave, but this can be found at the top of many, many, many of my pendants. Basically, you're tying the top section into a safe place so that it won't come undone. So I'm going to remove the pen or your bail making pliers if you prefer, and just flip that back over to the front now. You've got quite a long tail on this side. You could cut that down a little bit if you want to, or you can keep it exactly the same length as the one that's on the back. It's absolutely up to you. So I'm going again to make a coil shape here, starting with the round nose pliers, rotating that around until you get the beginnings of a rounded shape, and then just push that until you get a nice coil. Managed to hit the light today instead of the microphone. That makes a change. So pushing that all the way around, and then that's going to sit on the face of the bail, just up at the neck, and it just detracts from any slight messiness. You could obviously spend a little bit more time than I did and just make that slightly neater. You could be quite thoughtful about where you take those wires, and obviously you leave your bail maker in until you've got a really nice grip. So for the next stage, what we're going to do is open out those side wires, just like so. So the one that's at the top or on the left, depending on how you look at it, goes that way to the left. The one that's on the right goes out to the right. Now, the only limit to how many beads you put on this bar is how much wire you have left. So we've got quite a lot. And also which beads will fit on the wire. So let's have a look. Let's see if one of these milky faceted rondelle crystals will go on. Let's have a look. I think it should, because the other one did. Slide that all the way up to the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the side wire that's on the right hand side to begin with. And I'm going to hold that very, very firmly into position. Draw the wire that's on the right hand side around the bead over to the left hand side. Push your thumb down onto the bead, which is on top of your forefinger, and draw the wire that you were just using all the way around the core. So it has travelled, sticking out on the right hand side, all the way around the side of the bead, around that core wire, underneath and back where it came from. I'm going to do the exact same thing but in a mirror image. So a little bit of warmth goes a long way with this wire, with all wire. So I'm pinching thumb and forefinger over that first bead, drawing the wire around, and then allowing it to sit underneath the first wire that we just bent a second ago, so that it's making a nice little halo around that first bead. Now what you can do if you're incredibly cautious and sensitive is just give that a little bit of a tidy up. So I think we've got space to add a few more beads. I think we're going to pop in one of these gorgeous, looks like a frosted cake. Maybe that's because I've not had my dinner yet. Who knows? There goes the camera. So I'm going to add in my next bead, whatever it might be. And I'm going to repeat step 1, which was to take the right hand wire first. Again, I'm going to support the bead from underneath with my forefinger, from on top with my thumb. A little bit of heat into that wire, draw the wire around the side of the bead, push it around that core wire and back out to the right hand side. Now you can see that's quite a swooping shape. If you want to, you can tighten that up slightly with a set of pliers and just draw that back out. So again, we're going to follow suit with the left hand wire, goes around the left side of that bead, push that wire up against the base of the bead and then back out to where it started. And again, let me show you that from underneath this time. What you can do to tighten that up is very, very carefully hit the camera and then very carefully just squish that wire slightly to keep it nice and neat. Then we're going to bring in our feature bead, and hey, just for giggles, I think I'm going to set this one the right way up. So here comes that enormous, absolutely outstandingly gorgeous purple golem bead with a beautiful poppy, a peace poppy on the front there. So I'm just going to push the beads out of the way for a second so I don't do my classic trick of knocking them flying. I'm going to support the bead again, draw the right hand wire around first, use the margin. When you get to the big flat beads, you can do this really, really slowly. Just use the margins of the bead to make that halo shape, and then draw that tail all the way around. Now this time, because it's the last bead I want to add onto this section of the drop, I'm going to draw that over one more time. So it's come around the right hand side, looped around that core wire, and then continued again, and then one more half turn so that it goes back to where it started, but we've had a double loop around the centre. I'm then going to trim away that excess, which we will then use to create one of these drops in a few minutes if there's enough of it, or you can use it to make bar earrings. So I'm just going to tighten that coil up by rotating around. What we don't want to do is bring the wire too far over the surface of the bead. If you do that, you can simply undo your manoeuvre. That's the beauty of working with a lovely wire that you've warmed previously. You can almost take it back a step if you need to. So exactly as we did with the first bead and the second bead, we're going to repeat the step on the left hand side. Warm that wire first, allow it to swoop around using the shape of the bead, and then what we're going to do is draw the wire around that core so it goes back on itself, along in the same direction. You could tidy that up slightly, it's just a little bit messy, and then bring the tail back around. And what we're going to do with this one is just cut like so. A little bit more wire to use for other drops or projects. Squish and squeeze to get that nice and tight. Here we go. Again, you can just pop one side of your pliers on top of the core wire, one side underneath, and very, very gently squeeze those coils together. It's a technique that you will learn by doing, not by watching. So we've made the main section of our pendant, including that really lovely weave up at the top. Obviously you will have done that all the way around, and you will have spent a little bit more time than I did making that nexus point nice and neat and tidy. So to finish up at the bottom, what we're going to do is very simply a wrapped loop. Now I feel like I'm always showing you these. If you've never seen one before, you can slow the process down. What we're going to do is turn a sideways bend down at the base, apply a tips distance from the last wrapped loop, and then we're going to use a round form or round pliers. You could use your bell makers, you could hit the camera, draw that tail all the way around. Now I'm making quite an oversized loop because I want it to be a feature. Into this you could add any one of your tassels from any of your bead blends. We've had some absolutely stunning tassels to work with recently, but I'm going to use some more of the beads from this strand. It's a beautiful Golem strand here at Jessie James Beads. This is Purple Poppy. The link for this is in your video description. So to finish your wrapped loop, I'm going to make sure that I'm happy with the roundness of that shape down at the base. I'm going to draw the tail of wire all the way around until I have filled the gap, like so. Filled the space between the loop that we made down at the base and the loop that we've just created. And I'm going to trim that, but I'm going to pop another little coil on the surface, just to hide any imperfections. If you don't want a coil, take the cut end to the back and just force it to sit down inside the gap. I like a coil on this design. So I'm going to trim that to about 1.25 inches. And again, you've got more wire for other projects. Using your round nose pliers again, we're going to spin around to create that coil. And you can see that I'm creating the coil at 90 degrees to the project. And that's absolutely fine, because it means I can control the coil better. And then when I'm ready to sight it, I can just very simply flip that upwards and push that against the base of the golem bead. That covers any of the end sections from where those two pieces of side wire came together and then they were truncated. If that wasn't particularly pretty, hey ho, we've just hidden it. So what I'm going to do now is show you with the remainder of our beautiful Jessie James Beads Golem strand how to create a little bar section. So what we're going to do in reverse order is start down at the bottom by creating a coil. So if I just pop those two up slightly out of the way, could still get them, Place your bets now, ladies and gentlemen. Please don't, because this is not a betting site. We don't endorse gambling. But what we're going to do is grab the very end of one of those offcuts. If you don't have a piece of wire that's offcut, this is about 4.5 inches of 18 gauge. You could use the 16 gauge if you have it, whichever you have available. It's not massively load bearing. And what I'm going to do is just rotate that around until I get a couple of turns of that coil. Once I feel that it's large enough to balance the design, what we're going to do is turn an angle away from that coil. Now the best way to do this is to pop your pliers underneath. Any flat facing pliers will do, and just push until the disc sits as if it's at the very base of a long drop. It's almost like making your own kind of head pin. It's something that I've done for years in a pinch, create a head pin in this fashion. Now that top bit's a little bit kinked, so I'm just going to cut that away so that it's easier to pop the beads on. Now I absolutely adore these gorgeous column beads, I suppose you could call them. And I think I'm going to set it up the other way so that they are not exactly matching. Because I've got a slightly lighter wire this time, this is the 18 gauge, you can absolutely play around with your beads. So I'm going to use one of those slightly smaller, milky, faceted rondelles. You could put one of your daisy or star spacers top and bottom. So for this one I'm going to have the points going down and the rib section up at the top. And I'm going to add another one of those daisy spacers. I might just make this one completely symmetrical. And then we've still got some beads left over to play with, despite having made 2 full pieces of jewellery. So you could add on, you can see that on this piece I had one of the glass pearl style beads either side with one of those absolutely fabulous bead caps. They're really, really cool. Now what I'm going to do now is show you a basic of jewellery making with wire, which is how to create one wrapped loop inside another wrapped loop. So the first thing you need to do is look at how your jewellery wants to sit. So our disc at the base of our emergency head pin is going to sit flat against the body. This is how the pendant will sit on the body. So to create 2 pieces that wrap together, what we're going to do is have to create wrapped loops at right angles to one another. So if I pop the pliers just over the top of the assembly here and push the wire up, you can see that that is at 90 degrees to the coil that we created at the base. Once we've got that in our mind, we can create a loop shape. So I'm just going to bring that all the way around and then take the tail over the top, exactly the same as we did creating the wrapped loop at the base of our pendant. What we're going to do is ensure that that wrapped loop is the shape we want it to be. Give that a bit of a squeeze to strengthen it. We'll just get things off the screen. And then we're going to attach this loop into that one before we do the wrapping part of the wrapped loop process. So all I've done there, let me just slow that down, is I've taken the end of the as yet unwrapped wrapped loop, I've posted it through the wrapped loop we made in the preceding piece of the tutorial, and I'm just going to snicked, and that pops through really, really nicely. And yes, that was a Wolverine impression. I'm very sorry, but I'm not sorry. What I'm going to do now is to support the as yet unwrapped wrapped loop across the round shape. So holding the wire thusly, I'm not pressing the top half of the design and I'm not pressing where the wires cross over. What I'm going to do now is just very quickly wrap a couple of times. That's got good tension and those 2 wraps will be sufficient. This is not bearing a huge load. So that's 2 wraps, and I'm going to trim away that last little residue of wire as close as I can get it. Let's just take that out to the scrap pot. And what you'll see is that there is an elevated section. Now, when you're working against a glass bead, as we are here, please proceed with caution. All I want to do is to just flatten that down slightly. If there isn't space, what you can do is uncoil your coil slightly, but we do have enough space just to flatten that down. So let's have a look at the 2 types of piece that you could make and the beads that you still have left over. So I've still got one of these fancy iced cakes. I caught it, don't worry. And one of these glass pearl style beads. And I've still got another 2 bead caps. So I would probably make asymmetric earrings or charms with those. And we've got also now 2 full and complete pieces of Golem bead jewellery. That's all from one strand. I am just going to very, very quickly show you the other strands. I'm not going to go through the names again. You will be able to find them. I just love these so very much. I don't know which one is my favourite yet. I cut this one because I was just too excited. And then there's those as well. They are all super, super beautiful. I know Sarah really loves this one. I think I love this one, the water lily one. It's absolutely stunning. Let me scooch those over and we'll have a quick look at what we've made together today, or variations on what you can make with this design. I love movement in jewellery. Absolutely love it. So to have a joint in a piece of jewellery, you can size these down. You don't have to have the largest golem bead in your earrings. You could just have maybe one of the faceted milky rondelles and the cake bead, as it's going to be known from here on. That could be the top half of your earrings, little wrapped loop, and then just a tiny, tiny bead down at the bottom. You've still got movement with much less weight. Perfect for earrings. Earrings really enjoy moving around. Well, do you know, I'm assuming that they do. They look beautiful when they move around. Let's go with that instead. I'm still here, it's still me. Who else would talk this absolute waffle at you on behalf of Jessie James Beads but me? I have absolutely adored being with you today. I'm so sorry I haven't been able to interact with you directly. As soon as I sign off, I'm going to hit those comments hard and make sure that I answer any questions I possibly can. I'll be back again next week. Oh, do you know what? Before I go, if you haven't already checked out this Make With Me, I mean, you could wear it on your head, but maybe don't. I keep wanting to call it Heart of the Ocean, but it's not that. It's Soul of the Ocean. Make Along With Me kit. That is due to be a live class on the 2nd of April. Get your kit now and it'll be with you in time. It's been my pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much, Jessie James Beads, for having me here with you today. I'm Jem. I'm signing off for a week. I'll see you very, very soon. Don't forget also, Beads and Blooms is now half sold, over half sold. So if you fancy that, give it a bit of a check out. I'll see you guys very, very soon. Bye!